Hello, hello. All right. Yeah, I'll be running from point A to point B. So here we go. Welcome, welcome. Let me get the TikTok folks up and then we're finna get right into it. How's everyone? And please drop your hi, Brienne. Good evening. Drop in the chat for me. You know what I'm about to ask, huh? What chapter are you on? Can you drop that in the chat for me? What chapter you're on in the reading? I appreciate it. We having some real done with this. I think I got it. I got it good enough. How about that? Good enough. All right. Chapter 15 in the reading and the flashcards. Boom. I love to hear it. Let me put that in my notebook. All right. And I owe y'all that video. I figured out I can download the live from TikTok and upload that. So it's supposed to be doing that in the background right now. And then I'll get that uploaded for you guys on the YouTube. Because on YouTube, I think it cut out and you only have like half of it. Hi, Queen Shay. All right. So this is class 11. My goal today is to get through chapters 15 and 16. All right. Brienne said, I was on spring break last week for work, so I took full advantage of catching up. Beautiful. Yes. All right. I love that. And are the flashcards helping you guys? Hi, Letitia. Are the flashcards helping you at all, Brienne, on remembering this vocabulary? Are you able to take them out and about with you? 15 for both book and cards. And Letitia, drop for me in the chat. Everybody jumping in, drop for me in the chat where you are with your reading and your flashcards so I can make my little notes and then we'll get into it. Okay, good. I'm glad that it's helping. Because I'm telling you, even though I took the test, I was in the field for 5 years, entry-level technician. This was 2009. So they were more willing to hire you just straight off the street. And I worked in the field for 5 years before I bought the books and started reading and took the test. And I really don't think that anything helped me more than my flashcards, because knowing the vocabulary meant that when I ran into those tricky questions, I could figure out what they was trying to get at because I knew the vocabulary. Okay, Letitia working on getting through 13. Okay, great. That's all good. What about my TikTokers? What chapter y'all on? All right, let me know. Okay, we finna get into it real quick. So on here, remember, since I'm not on StreamYard, I can't put the notes into the screen, or at least I don't know how to do that on YouTube. So it will let me share my screen, but when I share the screen, I can't see your comments, YouTube. So I have to flip back and forth, which I absolutely will do. Okay, but just FYI. And then if anybody is interested, I know this is a free course, so I hesitate to ask y'all for any type of funding. But if anybody is interested in supporting the StreamYard subscription, I would greatly appreciate it. Okay, we are clicking on. Oh, wait, it's not it. I'm like, why do I not see this? Because it's not open. All right, now we got that. And I'm going to share screen. We're going to go to window. And we're going to open the notes. Also, I did get these notes uploaded onto the website, guys, because I knew I couldn't flip back and forth. So, if you want to download them for yourself, they are on Oh, it's showing up differently this time. Maybe we'll be okay. They are showing up on the website now. Okay, so chapter 15. Wait a second. If it's open for you, then it's open for me. So where did it go? Sorry, y'all. Okay, it's in a Microsoft Edge. Okay, child. They had me a little confused for a second. Okay, let me bring that back up here for y'all. And then we'll get going. Okay, so chapter 15, we're going over low temperature sterilization. And last Monday when we met, we talked about high temperature sterilization. So high temperature sterilization was us exposing the surgical instruments to steam, which we heated up to 270 degrees Fahrenheit. Low temperature is just what it sounds like. It's the exact opposite. So instead of us going way up high to 270 degrees Fahrenheit, this is going to be more of a cool or cold chamber, and it's going to use a chemical to do the sterilizing since we can't use that steam to do the sterilizing. Okay. I know you guys are watching from a few places. Do me a favor and like or share or comment from where you are. It helps my algorithms. I appreciate you. Okay, so chapter 15, our learning objectives. It's by the time you guys get to the end of the reading of this chapter, you should be able to define low temperature sterilization and explain why it is necessary for heat or moisture sensitive devices. So that shouldn't be new information to you guys. I've heard me say that a few times, that when it comes to like the stainless steel, that hard metal, I can expose that to temperatures that are 270 degrees. It's not going to melt on me. It's not going to damage it. But if I've got something wrapped in some type of rubber, I've got a plastic material and I expose it to 270 degrees Fahrenheit, it will melt. I've done that. I have melted things in the sterilizer before. Okay. So it's really important to pay attention to what type of sterilization your device can handle. We're going to identify the various types of low temperature steam sterilization, or excuse me, low temperature sterilization, because just like with steam had that prevac and that gravity displacement, those two types of steam, or the two types of steam sterilization, hydrogen peroxide is just one type of low sterilization. So we're going to talk about multiple types today. And then we're going to define sterility assurance level. And we're going to talk about the 5 things that you need to hit to have basic sterilization requirements. Now, what you will find when we talk about these basic sterilization requirements is that they apply to steam, they apply to low temp, they apply to chemical sterilization. It doesn't matter what type of sterilization it is, you're going to have these 5 basics. So I would highly recommend you go ahead and make a flashcard of that information as well. We're going to discuss the critical parameters for each low temperature sterilization method. And then lastly, we're going to explain the best practices for packaging and loading temperature sterilizers, low temperature sterilizers. Okay. All right, let me flip back and see if I have anything before I move on my YouTube. Okay. Y'all don't hesitate to ask questions, okay? All right. So thank y'all. I appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing the live, and I appreciate you tapping the screen. Introduction to low temperature sterilization. So the definition of low temperature sterilization is this is a sterilization of heat and moisture sensitive instruments using alternative methods instead of steam. Okay, so it's the definition of it is this. It is the exact opposite of steam sterilization. The purpose of it is it allows sterilization of delicate medical instruments without damage. And its common uses are for endoscopes, fiber optic devices, electrical components, and certain plastics, right? So if you guys saw that video where I showed the case card where I was in the decontam with no gloves on, big no-no, citable offense. That first box that was popping out, that was about to fall, was a fiber optic cord. You can tell from looking at it, you guys don't have to be in the field to look at that product and see. If I put that in something that's really hot, it's probably going to melt. And trust me, it will do just that. All of that rubber around those fiber optics would just melt right down onto it. All right, so anything that we're using that has electrical components like the cameras, I talked about how the cameras have computer chips and systems inside of them, all of that stuff, we cannot put that in a high temperature sterilizer. The benefits of low temperature sterilization. So the benefits are that it enables sterilization of complex and delicate instruments. It eliminates heat and moisture related damage. It provides effective microbial inactivation. So what does that mean? It provides an ability to kill all of the microbes. The killing of the microbes is effective. Okay. And then some methods, hydrogen peroxide, gas, or plasma, leave no toxic residues. So we've talked about this a little bit before with hydrogen peroxide, that it's made up chemically of 2 parts hydrogen and 2 parts oxygen. So when it has its chemical reaction and it gases off, it breaks off into hydrogen and oxygen. Those are non-toxic chemicals for us to release in the air, versus some of these products that we can use to achieve sterilization are more caustic, more toxic, and they may have to have like a deactivation product added to them, or something may have to happen to them before we dispose of them. So one of the good benefits about some of these low temperature methods is that they don't leave toxic residues. Okay, so basic sterilization requirements. We want to ensure effective and safe sterilization, and the following requirements must be met. Now, you guys remember on Monday, I talked about the fact that we can't be inside of the sterile package, right? We can't get in there with our own eyes and see if the sterilant touched everything. So we have to use chemical and biological indicators to put inside of the packaging and inside of the sterilizer to tell us if the sterilizer did what it needed to do. All of that is considered sterility assurance, okay? So your sterility assurance level is the probability that a single microorganism remains viable after sterilization. Typically, you're looking for a 10-6 reduction, or you're going to hear them say a 10 log 6 reduction. I'm not going to get into the science of that today, but if you guys need help with that, do let me know. There is reading around that. You're going to want to be familiar with the terms about log reduction when it comes to sterility assurance levels, but you don't need to be a chemist today about understanding. The essential fact of it is you're starting with a high load of microbes, and every log you're reducing down to hopefully getting to 0 remaining viable microbes alive. Viable meaning it's alive and can mutate and make more germs, right? So you're looking for a log reduction of at least a -6. Safety. You're going to ensure minimal risk to the patients and staff by using non-toxic residues and having safe handling procedures. Once the hydrogen peroxide touches the instrument, remember, we're not going back into that package until they open it in the operating room. So if that product was toxic, that would make it a risk for the patient. So that's a benefit that this is a non-toxic substance. And then we want to look at sterilization performance monitoring, which is going to be utilizing those biological and chemical indicators to verify the sterilizer effectiveness. And lastly, the penetration of the sterilant. We want to ensure that the sterilant reaches the surface and lumens of all complex instruments. Now, penetration of sterilant, we're going to talk about a little bit later in class, but the key thing I want you guys to keep in mind when it comes to this is when you're packaging your instrument sets, be mindful about leaving a little bit of space between things. You will find that there are oftentimes it can be anywhere from, you can have a small pack with 2 or 3 instruments in it, up to a cardiovascular pack with 100, 150 surgical instruments in one container, okay? So sometimes leaving a whole lot of space is not really optional. But if it gets to the point where you're like packing things in, I'm gonna caution you and I'm gonna ask you to talk to somebody about getting a separate container. Because if the sterilant is not able to get through there, then guys, this is a useless process. You're giving the illusion of sterilization and efficacy, but you're not actually allowing the sterilant to penetrate. And it's going to be the same thing when you're loading your sterilizer. I don't care what machine it is. I don't care what product it is. You're always going to have to leave a little bit of space between 2 boxes, right? So if I've got one sterile pack right here and I've got one sterile pack right here in the sterilizer, at no point should they be touching, because sterilant cannot penetrate right there. It's not that good. It's good, but it's not that good. Okay, so there's always got to be a little bit of space. My rule of thumb is to keep a finger width at least. If you can slide your hand in between them, that's good. All right. I don't see no questions over here. I'm going to keep going. Okay, so types of low temperature sterilization and their parameters. Okay, so we got a couple methods up here. The first one I have up here is ethylene oxide or ETO. This is probably going to be one of the types of low temperature sterilization you don't see that often anymore. Back in my day, you used to pretty much have a ETO machine in every SPD department. And then the EPA pushed for healthcare facilities to really get those out of there because ETO is toxic. So much so that even as staff, we would have to wear monitoring devices on us to make sure that there was no exposure in the room because we're talking about a gas, essentially. They come in canisters. And the machine itself doesn't exhaust. And when it exhausts out into the air. Therefore, we talked about these governing bodies. EPA then is very concerned about what it is the hospital is shooting off into the air, right? So they made a big push and a lot of facilities got rid of those. You see ETO more often in manufacturing of sterile products than you do inside of a sterile processing department. But that's not to say that you may never run into one. I don't want to give that illusion. There also was a big push to start bringing some of them back because they're pretty effective at sterilizing flexible endoscopes without causing any damage. The only problem is they take a really, really, really long time. It can take hours to exhaust an ETO machine because it has to get rid of all of that toxin. Okay, so ETO. The temperature range for ETO is 37 to 63 degrees Celsius. Also keep in mind your machine's instructions for use may say something different, so pay attention to that. Your sterilant used is going to be an ethylene oxide gas cartridge. Its exposure time is usually somewhere in between 2.5 and 12 hours of exposure. So this is not a fast process by any means. Its aeration is needed. So what do they mean when they say aeration? They mean letting it gas off, letting air flow in, letting it give off all of its toxic vapors before you open up the door. It needs to aerate that stuff out. Okay. So after the sterilization process, which could take anywhere from 2.5 to 12 hours, it then has to go into an aeration process that can take anywhere between 8 and 12 hours. So again, from the time I put that instrument into the ETO machine and the time I take it out, it could be tomorrow. Okay, so not a fast process at all. Materials that are compatible with ETO, most plastics, rubbers, and electronic devices are compatible. Honestly, almost everything in your surgical department is going to be compatible with ethylene oxide. It's just not going to be your first choice for sterilization because it takes so long. Okay, and it's toxic. All right, so hydrogen peroxide. This is the one you're going to see the most often. You're going to see these machines and they're going to be used to do materials like your cameras and your scopes, some flexible scopes. Excuse me. The temperature range for this is going to be somewhere between 40 to 55 degrees Celsius. The sterilant used is a vaporized hydrogen peroxide. So it too also comes in cartridges that you insert into the machine. The machine itself will open in the hydrogen peroxide, push it into the sterilizer, and then aerate or exhaust itself. Usually the exposure of the sterilant, and I do want y'all to pay attention to that. When it says exposure time, it's talking about how long that instrument is touching a sterilant. When it talks about aeration or dry time, it's talking about how long it takes to gas off that sterilant or how long it takes to dry that packaging so that it is all sealed up and ready to go into sterile storage. Okay, so a hydrogen peroxide exposure time is usually somewhere between 38 and 75 minutes. I would say roughly you could say it averages about 30 minutes to 45 minutes. It just depends on what type of machine you're using, what type of products you're sterilizing, and what your IFU says. The beauty of hydrogen peroxide is it does not require aeration, period. It's going to gas off in that machine and you'll be good to go. And then, like I said, it's compatible with almost all surgical instruments, but especially your plastics, your rubbers, your things with computer devices inside of them. All right. Then we have vaporized hydrogen peroxide, similar process. So I'm not going to repeat it. You guys can see there. The only difference between the gas plasma and the vaporized hydrogen peroxide is what type of cartridge you're going to be using. I would say as far as what you see the most often is most often going to be a VHP machine, a vaporized hydrogen peroxide machine. And notice on the materials that are compatible with the vaporized hydrogen peroxide that it also talks about paper-based materials, okay? And then the last one we have is ozone sterilization. So this is another chemical sterilant. Its temperature range is 30 to 40 degrees Celsius, and it's a ozone gas. This one, exposure time is 4 to 5 hours. It does not require aeration, and it does have a very limited amount of surgical instruments that you can actually use with it. More than likely, whatever you're buying, if it requires ozone sterilization, is something very specific and complex, okay? You're not going to see a whole lot of that in your sterile processing career. Okay, so we talked about the different types of low temperature sterilization. Let's talk about how you package it and get it ready to go into the sterilizer. So the packaging that you use must allow penetration of the sterilant while preventing microbial contamination. The approved packaging includes non-woven wraps, Tyvek pouches, and rigid sterilization containers designed for this specific sterilization method. Now, why do I make that special note? You can put non-woven wraps, which are those blue wraps that we saw the other day on the video, Tyvek pouches, which is what your textbook is referring to when they talk about peel packs, which is that paper bag. It has paper on one back side and then it has a plastic polyurethane on the front. Those are your peel packs or your Tyvek pouches. And then those rigid containers are the metal boxes that you lock and put the instruments inside of, okay? We have rigid containers and Tyvek pouches and non-woven wraps for both high temp and low temp sterilization. Not every product can cross between both machines. Some of them are good to go in either one. Some of them are only specified for each one. So you have to pay attention to your instructions for use because, again, it's just like trying to sterilize something that's dirty. You can't sterilize dirt. You can't get the sterilant to penetrate underneath the dirt, right? You can't. It doesn't work. Many have tried, all have failed. Another thing that you cannot do is guarantee sterility if you use the wrong type of product to put into the sterilizer. If I wrap my hydrogen peroxide product in a Tyvek pouch that is not compatible with the hydrogen peroxide machine, then I cannot guarantee the efficacy of that sterilant. I don't know that it's been able to really penetrate through the paper or the polyurethane. I don't know that it was able to touch all the surfaces of the instrument, okay? So you have to make sure that you're looking for the instructions for use at every level. Your packaging, your machines, and your surgical instruments are all going to have independent guidance on that. And then lastly with this, the packaging must be dry and free of moisture before sterilization. Oh my God. There is nothing worse in the world than loading up a hydrogen peroxide sterilizer and you push the stuff in there and you press start and it goes and it goes. And then it says beep, but not when it's done. Way before, because it has detected that there's moisture inside the machine. Remember I said that hydrogen peroxide is made up of 2 parts hydrogen, 2 parts oxygen. If I have oxygen inside of the chamber already in the form of water, when the machine detects that, it will stop the whole process. You will have to take everything out, repackage it in new sterilization material, and start all over again, okay? Water is your absolute enemy when it comes to low temperature sterilization. Think about it from the perspective of this as well. The steam sterilizer heats up to 270 degrees, sometimes up to 275, just depends on the machine. If I have water on that stainless steel and I put it into the steam sterilizer, the machine is going to evaporate that because of how hot it gets. Now, saying that, I don't want you to think that it's okay to just put soaking wet instruments into a steam sterilizer. You can also overload the machine, right? But a couple specks of water is not going to be a big deal. Versus hydrogen peroxide machine, if I put that in there, a couple drops of water is going to stop the whole process. You will find in the processing department, oftentimes we will use what they call a drying cabinet to put the instruments in to make sure we get an opportunity to evaporate all that moisture before we bring it to processing and get it ready for low temp sterilization. All right. So loading the low temperature sterilizers. Number one, I know I've said it 1,000 times, and guess what? I'm gonna say it 1,000 times more. And when you get into your career, you better be saying it 1,000 times to somebody else. You're always going to first and foremost follow the manufacturer's guidelines, their instructions for use. So the manufacturer of whatever sterilizer you're using is going to tell you how you should load it, what is safe for you to do with loading, how far apart things should be, how much things should weigh. Especially with steam sterilizers, they will often have a weight limit that tells you that after this, like after 25 pounds of surgical instruments, cut it out. You're going to have to put that on the next load, okay? It's going to be the same thing for low temperature sterilization. You can only put so much into that machine. So it may have guidance to tell you, okay, less than 20 pounds of equipment, no matter how many pieces, no matter how many small. If you could fit 1,000 of them in there, great. But if it's over 20 pounds, you're going to take some out. You want to ensure that items are positioned to allow sterilant penetration. So we talked about that, right? Keep some spacing between the instrument sets. You will have a little bit of a trouble with this when it comes to peel packs, because peel packs, oftentimes people want to just lay them on top of each other. I do caution you, there are some different types of equipment that you can get to add to your sterilizer where you can keep those things separated. Do not overload the sterilizers. Adequate spacing is required, and items must be dry to prevent sterilant failure. Okay, so key takeaways from chapter 15. Low temperature sterilization is required for heat and moisture sensitive devices. Sterility assurance levels, or SAL, is exposure monitoring and sterilization performance testing are essential for ensuring sterility. So again, exposure monitoring is when you have those chemical indicators, you put them into the package, and the sterilant will touch them. They will have a chemical reaction, and usually what you're looking for is a color change. They might go from pink to brown or from white to black, something of that nature. That's exposure monitoring. I'm seeing that my instruments were exposed to a sterilant. Then on the other side, you're looking for the sterilization performance testing, which is going to be making sure I'm hitting the temperature, I'm hitting the exposure times, I'm not seeing no errors in the machine, all my pressures are right. So your machine will print out a ticket for you for every single cycle that will give you that information, and you will become adept at how to read that. There will be a little bit of information about that in your textbook. I do encourage you to look over it, but don't get lost in trying to understand it, because honestly, honey, right now, if I was to go in anybody's sterile processing department and take a ticket up to somebody and ask them to explain it to me, it might not happen. Okay, so it's not mission critical information for your test, but it is something I do want you to be familiar with. And it is something I'll also say that can be something that helps set you apart if you do learn that information, because it is a little complicated sometimes to read those printer tickouts. And so everybody loves to have a person there that understands that. And then we talked about the different low temperature sterilization methods. Each one of them have unique parameters and limitations, so you want to become familiar with that. Right, no two methods of sterilization had the same temperature or same exposure times or same requirements for aeration, so you want to become familiar with those. All right, so my favorite part, y'all better get y'all Twitter fingers ready. We're going to type out some answers. Let's do a quick review over the concepts of chapter 15. Okay, so the first question I have up there is, what is the primary advantage of low temperature sterilization? Is it A, it is faster than steam sterilization? Is it B, it eliminates the need for biological indicators? Is it C, it allows sterilization of heat and moisture sensitive instruments? Or D, it requires no monitoring? What y'all got for me? What y'all got, TikTok? Oh, it is. Okay, good. Okay, I see a C over here on TikTok. What's going on, YouTube? What's going on? Y'all better not have me up in here for an hour talking to myself for free. Y'all better not do it. I don't see nothing coming up in y'all chat. That makes me nervous too. Are y'all having connection issues again? All right. Uh-oh. That makes me a little concerned because I don't see nothing over there. Okay, so the answer for that one, I don't see nothing over there, is C, Queen Shade. It is C. It allows for sterilization of heat and moisture sensitive instruments. Okay, question number 2. What does sterility assurance level measure? Does it measure A, the number of bacteria present before sterilization, B, the probability of microorganisms surviving sterilization, C, the temperature at which sterilization occurs, or D, the duration of sterilization exposure? Yes, I can. Can you see that, Letitia? Is that where you wanted it at? D. Queen Shay on TikTok said the answer is D. What y'all got, YouTube? So that was question 2. I don't think that's on your screen no more. That was question 2. What does sterility assurance level measure? Okay, perfect. Okay, you got where you need to be. Okay. All right. So sterility assurance measures B, the probability of a microorganism surviving sterilization. Okay. So we can never say 100% if the bug survives. We're looking at that chemical and that biological indicator to make our best educated guess to say that more than likely, high probability, because I met the parameters of the sterilization monitoring, and because I see these color changes on my chemical indicators, the probability of a microorganism surviving sterilization is very low. So SAL is looking at that. Number 3, what is penetration of sterilant critical? Why is sterilization? Lord, I'm reading what I want to read. I'm thinking I'm thinking about what I'm about to say before I read it. Number 3 is, why is penetration of sterilant critical in low temperature sterilization? Is it critical because it prevents the item from overheating? It ensures the surfaces and lumens are exposed to the sterilant. C, it reduces sterilization cycle time. Or D, it allows immediate use of instruments. Okay, Letitia said B, that it ensures the surface and lumens are exposed to the sterilant. What y'all got, TikTok? Why is penetration of a sterilant critical in low temperature? Queen Shay said B. All right. So the answer to this one is B. It ensures that all surfaces and lumens are exposed to a sterilant. That is why penetration is critical. We want to make sure that it touches every single piece of the instrument because the instrument is going to be touching our patient. Number 4, which of the following is an example of an exposure monitoring method for low temperature sterilization? Now, the options for this one are A, using a dry heat indicator, B, performing a Bowie-Dick test, C, using biological and chemical indicators, and D, checking the expiration date of the sterilant. Which of the following is an example of exposure monitoring methods? What you got, Shay? Shay said A, using a dry heat indicator. Now, Shay, I'm going to read this question back to you. And thinking about the terms in answer A, I'm going to tell you straight up, that's not right. But I want you to think about the terms in answer A. Because we're talking about low temp sterilization. So heat will never be a factor, right? So if I was taking this test right now and I was looking at it and I wasn't 100% sure about what the answer is, I can go ahead and rule A out because I know when I'm looking at low temp, I'm probably not talking about any type of heat. All right, so I'm going to read that again. Number 4, which of the following is an example of an exposure monitoring method for low temperature sterilization? A, using a dry heat indicator. B, performing a Bowie-Dick test. C, using biological indicators and chemical indicators. Or D, checking the expiration date of the sterilant. Which I'll talk about YouTube. Okay, I can see a couple C's on YouTube. Give it another try for me, Queen Shay. Because I want y'all to practice that. Because that's what test taking is. You're going to run up against these questions, and not every single one of them you're going to know right off the bat. But if you know this vocabulary and you understand the methodology of what you're doing, it should help you start to rule some things out. Okay? So the answer to that one is C. Excuse me. Which is using your biological indicators and your chemical indicators. Right? So we're getting closer. That's good. That's good. Because between those two, you got 50-50 chance of getting that answer right. Versus between all 4, right, we throwing the odds more up in the air. So that's why I said it to you like that. Because I want y'all to be thinking about your vocabulary in that way. All right, so when it comes to exposure monitoring of a low temp sterilization cycle, the things I'm going to use, the 2 products that I'm going to use to monitor the exposure is a biological indicator and a chemical indicator. Okay. Remember, biological indicators are the material that has a little bit of bugs in them. There's a vial, some liquid, has some bacteria in it. It goes into the sterilizer. And we're able to use it as an exposure test because when we take it out, we're going to incubate that vial. If that vial tells me that it's negative for any life forms, I'm able to verify that sterilant was exposed to my instruments. See how that works? But if that thing was to tell me that it was positive and it was still growing stuff, then I know that that sterilization load is not safe because the sterilant wasn't able to kill all the bugs inside the biological indicator. And then the chemical indicator, remember I said, is usually going to be that color change one. So again, I'm able to test the exposure and see and monitor it and see that it changed anything. If I put the chemical indicator inside the machine and it's white and I take it out and it's still white, chemical did not touch everything. So this is not a safe load. So those 2 tests combined help you do exposure monitoring. And you will do exposure monitoring for every single type of sterilization, whether it's steam or whether it's low temp. It's just what type of product. So same as your packaging where you can have a wrap or a peel pack that can go into either one. You may have some products that can go into either one, but more than likely they will be specifically either for high temp or for low temp sterilization. And some even get it specific to be for a certain manufacturer. Okay. Okay, last review question for 15. Why must items be completely dry before low temperature sterilization? I better see this, okay? Why must items be completely dry before low temperature sterilization? A, moisture can interfere with the sterilant penetration and effectiveness. B, wet items increase the sterilization cycle times. C, dry items improve packaging integrity. Or D, moisture accelerates bacterial growth after sterilization. All right, I see a D. We're going to talk about it. But D is not the correct answer. Why must the items be completely dry before low temperature sterilization? Oh, so I see 2 Ds. Okay. All right, let's talk about it. I see a B. B was wet items increase sterilization cycle times. Okay, so let's talk about this because we don't have a grasp on this. All right, so you guys remember me saying that with low temperature sterilization, you could be using chemicals, right? So we talked about ETO, we talked about hydrogen peroxide, whether it was vaporized or ozone gas, right? So all these different chemicals, they do not mix well with water. Steam is heated up water. So if I have a little bit of drops of water and I put something into a steam sterilizer, not a big deal. Not the worst thing in the world that can happen. Machine's going to heat that water up and remember it's going to pull that pulse and pull all that air and water out that machine and push in steam. Low temperature is not doing that. It's dealing with chemicals. It's not going to dry that water off in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so as soon as your low temperature sterilizer comes in contact with water, it will immediately stop its sterilization cycle. It will alarm and it will say, hey, Queen Shay, you got to come get these items out this sterilizer because, baby, we can't do it. It's too much water in here. When you are dealing with low temperature sterilization, it must always be dry before you put it into the machine. If it is not, the machine will do what we call abort cycle. It will abort, it will alarm. Okay, so let's try number 5 again together. Why must items be completely dry before low temperature sterilization? Is it A, moisture can interfere with sterilant penetration and effectiveness? B, wet items can increase sterilization cycle times? C, dry items improve packaging integrity? Or D, moisture accelerates bacterial growth after sterilization? Let me see some new answers. Okay, I see a new answer from Shay. Do I see some new answers from YouTube? And while y'all coming in, I'm gonna go up the ones that are incorrect, right? So D is incorrect because D says that moisture accelerates bacterial growth after sterilization. Now, this one is a little tricky because moisture does accelerate microbial growth. If I'm giving bugs and bacteria and spores a little bit of water and a little bit of heat, that is going to increase microbial growth. But what's the problem with this question right now? The question is asking me about what happens to my items before I put them into the sterilizer. At no point would I ever expect for my sterilizer to complete its cycle and then I'm still growing bugs, right? So we can knock D right off. If it's dealing with accelerating microbial growth, then it's not dealing with sterilization. And then C said dry items improve packaging integrity. Now, this is, again, kind of tricky because it's true. A dry item does not compromise packaging integrity, but it also doesn't change the integrity of the packaging. Because it's dry, it doesn't make it a better package, right? So we can cross C off our options. B was wet items increase sterilization cycle times. What did I say before? If a low temp sterilization cycle runs into water, it aborts, it stops, it alarms, it goes no further. So therefore, we can say that that's incorrect because it would never increase it, it would shorten it. Leaving only option A, which is moisture can interfere with the sterilant penetration and effectiveness. Anywhere there's water, those chemicals will not mix together. Therefore, that sterilant is not effective. Okay, so the answer to that one was A. All right. Any questions over low temp sterilization, chemicals, the parameters, packaging, before I move on to chapter 16? All right, I don't see nobody. Okay. So now between Monday and today, we've talked about the 2 different types of sterilization, which is high temp and low temp sterilization. We've talked about all the different methods that can happen inside of there, but the main takeaways are we have to have a clean instrumentation. We have to package it in a compatible, and you guys will hear the word compatible 1,000 times, with a compatible sterilization material. And now we've exposed it to a sterilant and it's completed its cycle. We're taking those items out of the sterilizer and it's time to store them. And there are definitely rules to sterile storage and transport. If we spend all this time cleaning our product and checking it to make sure that the scissors are sharp and the rongeurs are punching, we didn't wrap it up, we didn't sterilize it, and then we go and we put it in a room that is not compatible with sterility, we have just wasted a whole lot of time and a whole lot of money. All right, so key learning objectives with chapter 16. By the end of this chapter, you guys should be able to define sterile storage and explain its role in infection prevention. We talked about this a little bit the other day, but essentially, its role in infection prevention is to keep the package sterile. So it's not growing no bugs. And that way we can introduce it aseptically to our patient. And our patient is having a diminished exposure to microbes. So sterile storage is critical in your role as an infection preventionist. You want to identify and differentiate types of shelving. We'll talk about open, semi-closed, and closed shelving. We want to describe the best practices for shelf cleaning and maintenance. We want to explain the event-related sterility and factors that compromise sterility. That will be a little bit of a repeat for y'all, but I'll go through that again. We're going to discuss personal hygiene standards for handling sterile materials, because again, there's no point in me going through this process of cleaning and sterilizing it, and then here you come with your dirty hands, touching everything, making everything nasty. All right. And then lastly, we want to outline the proper arrangement of surgical instruments and storage, because there are some rules about how we package things. I appreciate you liking the live, Queen Shay. And then we want to explain the guidelines for sharing sterile instruments with sister facilities. So again, that'll be a little bit of a repeat for y'all, but I'll go through that again today. Okay, so general environmental conditions for sterile storage. I want to remind you again that our parameters for sterile storage are going to come from our governing body. So that might be ARN, that might be AMI. There's also some other ones that produce things like what are TIR projects or TII reports. It could be coming from engineers. It might come from a few different places. But in general, the temperature of a sterile storage room should not be hotter than 75 degrees Fahrenheit. If you come into a sterile storage room, and I don't care where you are in the world, if you go into a sterile storage room and it feels like it's 90 degrees in there, you need to call somebody immediately. Because what happens is everything that is in that sterile storage room has a time limit on how long it can be out of range. Once it's out of range for too long, baby, you can throw that all in the trash. And I've done that before. It is painful to have to go through a sterile storage. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of product, guys, that you might have to throw in the trash because you were out of range too long. It's why I told you before when we talked about this that it requires daily monitoring. That might look like record keeping for you, where there's a sheet on a clipboard you check every day and you look at the temperature gauge and you say, yep, Queen Shay, 7:18 a.m., the room was 65 degrees. And we're moving on, right? Those are your legal documents to say that I checked it and I made sure it was right. It may also be an electrical monitoring system that has some type of gauge that sends messages to your facilities department and to your sterile processing leadership to let them know. They might get a text that says, hey, your room is currently 76 degrees, right? And I'm finna come running. The other thing we want to look at, besides how hot it is in the room, is how much moisture is in the air, how much humidity is in there. So, and typically you're going to stay between 30 to 60% humidity. If I had much more humidity than that, it's almost the same with the temperature. I'm giving now way too much moisture, way too much, because I guarantee you if your humidity is up, probably your temperature is up. I'm giving way too much heat, way too much moisture, and now I'm growing bugs. You can almost think about sterile storage as being like going into a refrigerator. You want to keep it cool in there because the colder that room is, the less bugs can grow and migrate. And then lastly is the air exchange. We want to keep a clean airflow in this room. So that room will typically have no less than a minimum of 4 air exchanges per hour. And again, that may be monitored electronically with facilities, or it may be something that you are responsible for monitoring. It really just depends on where your facility is at and how up to date they are. But those are the 3 things we're always looking for. If any of those 3 things are out of range for any reason, for I would say at the minimum an hour, we need to start talking to somebody immediately. Honestly, if you come across it, you need to alert somebody immediately. But I hesitate to give a time frame because it really depends